Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Hannah Quinn Mulligan, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. Coming up today.
So this is a group, a very, very difficult group to reach and a very difficult group to impress or change their ways of working. But I think we have to do a lot of work in this area.
With farming remaining the most dangerous industry in Ireland, what are the HSA doing to make farmers more aware of farm safety?
Decided that Brazil was a great place to build an agricultural business and set about that with a few friends, and it's been an interesting ride since.
And how does a New Zealand farm boy become director of one of the biggest dairy companies in Brazil? But first, tillage farmers have been protesting the low prices they're getting over the past couple of weeks. An oireachtas committee this week published a report on the future of the sector, and our correspondent Amy Forde asked the chair of the committee, Pat Griffin, what the main points of the report were.
First of all, we put a lot of time and effort into this report. We invited in all the stakeholders straight across the board, the breweries, distillers, obviously the farmers and Tagus as well. We identified 35 different recommendations in the report, detailing areas such as the tillage sector itself, increasing yields and profitability in the sector, energy generation, energy crops, horticulture, input costs, the role of finance and availability of finance, and the developments in the whole tillage sector itself. We also looked at the organic sector and we saw the possibility of in certain, even though it's a specialised area, there are huge possibilities in it, a huge profitable area as well, even though it is specialised.
And we'll say on prices for malt and barley growers, maybe the sugar beet industry as well. What are you recommending for those? Yeah,
on the malt and barley sector, it's an area that we put a lot of time into, and we see that there's huge challenges there at the moment. We feel that there should be more of a long-term contracts made available between the malting sector, between the malting industry and the farmers, so that there will be a bit of certainty going forward for the farmers in that sector. We feel it's very important in that regard. With the beet sector, we see that the challenges that have been presented with the tillage sector have arrived as a result of the demise of the beet industry approximately 10 years ago. We feel that at this stage now there is time for another review of the potential for the beet sector. It is now 5 or 6 years since there was a feasibility study done in that sector. At the time, it was felt that there was a viable proposition. But because it's 5 years now down the line, we feel that it's time for another review. It can be very beneficial. It can be an important part from a break crop point of view and from a cash point of view as well for the farmer. So at this stage we're looking for another review in the possibility of that.
The last couple of years weather-wise have been awful for the tillage sector. Basically there's been a number of schemes in place to help growers. What are your thoughts on crop insurance in the report and how that might come through in the next cap as well? Yeah, that's something that we've looked at, and it's something that initially we were sceptical about because of obviously farmers will have to pay into it. But we're seeing, as you mentioned, the fact that the last couple of years have been challenging from a weather point of view. It is difficult putting a compensation package in place, and we see with the recent compensation package was announced, it's a year since the actual incidents took place. We have other areas at the moment who, as a result of this year's harvest, who are struggling and cannot access the package that's put in place recently for last year. So in order to have something going forward, again to create a bit of certainty, we're looking for a more in-depth analysis done of the possibility of an insurance scheme put in place. As part of the committee, we were invited to France earlier in the year to discuss with the French, the Polish and the Italians about how an insurance scheme may work in the new CAP post 2020. I think it is something worth considering and worth analysing going forward. It does require obviously a bit more thought, but I think it's something that I wouldn't push under the carpet at this stage yet. And finally, there's a swath of pages there on GM crops and also on organics. The two kind of bounce off each other. What are you proposing or recommending for those sectors in the tillage sector? Yeah, well, first of all, GM is obviously a huge area. It's, we feel that for the tillage sector to be viable for the future, it must be obviously maintained as is. For organics, there's, as I said a few minutes ago, there's huge potential in that area. We've seen the possibility of
of €700 per hectare of a profit being made available or being on that. It's very specialised, but it's something that I think can be developed. It is a very low proportion of the whole tillage sector. It's 2% of the tillage sector in organics at the moment. I think that can be developed even further, and increase maybe even up to another 4%. I think would be hugely beneficial to the whole sector.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
As we're all aware, Brexit is an ever-constant issue on the horizon, and Lord Curry, known as the champion of farmers, spoke to our correspondent Peter McCann at Queen's University Belfast about Brexit negotiations, the future of the agricultural policy in the UK, and the definition of the public goods that farmers provide.
Lord Curry, in Westminster and our policymakers and our Brexit negotiators, is there an understanding of agriculture and the importance of it to the UK, and also is there an understanding of the difference in agriculture across the UK from the south of England to where I'm from and the north coast of Northern Ireland?
The short answer to that is no, it's not good enough. Understanding by both politicians in Westminster and the public at large of the importance of agriculture in some cases is quite limited. Obviously we have politicians who know a lot about agriculture, they've got agricultural constituencies and they're close to the farming sector. But of course we're a very urbanised country now, particularly in England. We have a large population of people who've never been on a farm. So their knowledge of agriculture is quite limited, and the views of their politicians often reflect that rather limited knowledge. So we have a real challenge to make sure that we are getting our message across. I mean, not just because we want the public to better understand what we do need that, understand the importance of the countryside, what farmers do, the food they eat and why that's sustaining the countryside. And they need to know that because it's an important economic activity. It's important for their health. They understand the importance of food, important from a science point of view, and careers and everything else. But actually now, with this Brexit debate raging, we need to make sure that agriculture and food is seen by our politicians and our negotiators as the largest single industry sector in Britain. So we represent 18% of GDP if we include food manufacture and processing along with agriculture. There's no other industry as large as that in the United Kingdom. So what we don't want is for agriculture and food to be ignored in the Brexit negotiations, in the trade deals, in order to get access to markets for other industries. This is crucially important, and we have to keep saying this very loudly to our politicians and our negotiators.
Just to turn to the agricultural policy, in Westminster there'll be two extremes of thought, and some of your peers have heard them saying in subcommittees, and recently even Lord Everson said, should we be moving farmers off? We call it subsidies, payments. Other than the energy industry, no other industry subsidised in the UK. At the other extreme is there like the status quo of what we have now, or so in general. Is there a large? Is that the two extremes, and is the general consensus somewhere in the middle, or is it just all over the place at the minute? The thinking on agricultural policy.
Well, there is certainly lack of clarity at the moment. I mean, everyone's having discussions every day about this subject, and everybody's producing reports. There's masses of data and information out there, and people often expressing opinions on a subject they know very little about. When you've got to avoid like we have at the moment, that's going to happen. What we need to do, in my view, is to be very clear as to why continued public support for agriculture, for farming, is justified and necessary. And we should stop using the word subsidy. I don't like the idea that we are being subsidised. We are being paid to deliver an attractive countryside. The public want our countryside cared for and looked after. It's where people go, visit, enjoy. They want to walk, they want to enjoy it when they're travelling. So we manage that countryside. We farmers look after that countryside. We need to be very clear about the public benefits, the public goods that we deliver, and why we can justify continued public investment in the delivery of the services we provide in the management of the countryside. We need to articulate that much better than we've done before. And it's crucial. The amount that government spends supporting agriculture, £3 billion a year, is piddlingly small. This is a small amount of money compared to the size of our industry and the benefits we deliver. So we need to make those arguments to the politicians, to the Treasury, to those who are negotiating our future and helping to design the way we will move forward.
So finally, Lord Curry, what you're talking about there, the public goods and delivering for the countryside, that's very much the agri-environment approach. So subsidies post-Brexit, is cheap food, it's going to be a cheap food policy. Is that a public good? Should payments, sorry I called them so, should support, offset the cheap food policy?
Well, what we need to define very clearly is what we mean by public goods. Yes, managing the countryside, looking after the environment, the habitats, the countryside features, all of those things are important public goods which we deliver. We look after the hedges, the stone walls, all the stuff. But the definition of public goods needs further debate. Looking after our soils is an important issue for us. Food security, I would argue, is a public good. The nation needs to be sure it has a supply of sustainably produced food available. And we can't guarantee that in a global market that can be disrupted by climate change, by conflict. If we're depending largely on imported food, that's a high-risk strategy. We need to be encouraging the production of food here from our own resources, from our own farms, that's going to satisfy a significant proportion of our food requirements. And that, for me, is a public benefit, a public good. And we need to decide how we're going to deliver that in terms of monetary terms. But it's something we have to explore.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
As mentioned in the intro, farming remains the most dangerous occupation in Ireland, with an average of 13 deaths per 1,000 workers on farms, compared to just 2.5 deaths per 1,000 workers in other industries. Our correspondent Amy Forde asked Pat Griffin, Senior Inspector for Agriculture with the HSA, what needed to be done in farming to make it safer and ensure that there were fewer fatalities.
Well, the conference today in Ennis has clearly shown that there's certain issues that we really have to face in agriculture. One of the biggest issues is the risks to elderly people on farms. This year, 12 of the 21 deaths are to over 65s. 11 are to over 70s. So this is a very, very difficult group to reach, and a very difficult group to impress or change their ways of working. But I think we have to do a lot of work in this area. We will be working hard on trying to reach these people, to try to give them the proper information to protect themselves. This is one of the biggest challenges we're going to face. But again, in this conference, we found that machinery and the size of the machinery and working in yards and pressure on farmers and the amount of work they do in a day and rushing and the pressure they're under is another area. So work organisation, trying to streamline what they're doing, planning their work and protecting themselves is another area that we will be focusing on with all the farming organisations.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
And just a reminder that the organisation Embrace Farm is holding its first Farm Accident Survivors Conference in the Midlands Park Hotel, Portlaoise, this Saturday. It starts at 11:30am and attendance is free. Coming up after this, we'll hear what TDs are doing to help battle rural crime and how a man from New Zealand became director of one of the biggest dairy companies in Brazil.
Tillage farmers on their knees. For more in this week's Farmers Journal, here's Paul Mooney.
Farmers get just 1% from the price of a pint of Guinness. Exclusive Farmers Journal survey shows agri-employment is on the rise. Find out which companies are hiring in our agri-job supplement. Maximising your sheep welfare scheme payment. Building a 3-bay suckler shed for €40,000. And calls for Department to launch its fodder relief scheme.
Plus, don't miss our 10-page special on tractors inside this week's Irish Farmers Journal, on sale today.
Some of you will know that the Irish Farmers Journal is hosting National Dairy Day at Punchestown Event Centre tomorrow on the 23rd of November. Included in the lineup of speakers is Craig Bell, a man from New Zealand who is now director of Latissima Dairy in Brazil. Our agribusiness correspondent Lorcan Allen had a chance to catch up with him before the main event and asked him how he'd got started in the industry.
I was actually born on a farm in the very north of New Zealand, and I think my father decided I'd be better off as an engineer than a farmer, but I've always loved agriculture, and after working for the New Zealand Dairy Board for a long time, I kind of went full circle and got involved back in building a farm in Brazil because I ended up in Brazil with the New Zealand Dairy Board early 2000s and had a great time there, but decided that Brazil was a great place to build an agricultural business, and set about that with a few friends, and it's been an interesting ride since.
Over the course of your time in Brazil, like, how would you say the country has developed in terms of agriculture over there?
Oh, hugely. When I first went to Brazil, I remember we had a year-long waiting queue to get a cell phone, and I joke with people, they forget how much we've come in such a short time over there, but you know, agriculture used to be about 80 million tonnes of crops, and they're talking 240 million tonnes of crops per year now in just 20 years. It's a phenomenal story, really. Not so much in milk. Milk's got a long way to catch up. It's still very fragmented, but generally agriculture in Brazil is pretty sophisticated and very, very efficient.
Okay. And just I suppose about the farm that you set up over there, Latissima business, I mean, where exactly is it in relation to Brazil, and what is it? How did you develop it?
Well, our farm is about 350 kilometres north of Brasilia, so we're only 14 degrees south of the equator. It's in a region called the Cerrado, and that's kind of the new frontier for a lot of cropping, but we also found out that the climate there is very, very good for growing grass without making Bos Taurus cattle too stressed in summer from heat. So we found this kind of microclimate that looked to be really good from a production point of view, but also from animals that we already knew from back in New Zealand. And then we decided that it would be a good idea to kind of vertically integrate as well. So we built our own dairy factory to go with the production system.
Okay. So you've arrived in Brazil, you're trying to take that kind of New Zealand grass-based model. I mean, what kind of varieties of grass do well in the Cerrados, and what cow type did you go for to be able to survive the heat?
Yeah, well, grass is certainly not like New Zealand grass. It's not your ryegrass and clover mix. We use a grass called Chieftain. It's a C4 grass. It's a tropical grass. A Bermuda grass would be probably the best way to describe it. But we do kind of grow about 44, 45 tonne of dry matter per hectare per year. And for the cows, we went for a cross between Jersey and Friesian, Kiwi cross, as you probably know them over here, I guess. And those animals are good for the type of dairy products that we want to produce from a solids point of view, but also they can handle the heat in summer well enough and not cause any issues with heat stress.
Okay. So Craig, you're going to be speaking on Thursday at the Dairy Day about kind of your perspective of the dairy markets in North and South America. I mean, what would you say have you seen in the last year? A lot of milk coming out of North America particularly, and but also increase in production in other parts of the world.
Yeah, well, I think down in South America for a start, we've got a bit of a mixed bag. We've had a very big increase in milk in Brazil in the last 6 months. That's a lot due to the cheap feed that's floating around in the market down there at the moment. Uruguay and Argentina are still struggling a bit, and the US looks as if it's building a bit of inventory to me that might be an interesting issue in the near future. But it's all pretty much a Brazil story down in the Mercosur at least. I think we've got an extra 10% of milk year on year at the moment, and that's created its own set of issues for markets all around the region, I think.
Craig Bell there. And to make sure that you have your Dairy Day tokens ready to take with you to Punchestown tomorrow.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Now, rural crime remains a serious issue in Ireland, with ongoing reports of attacks on farmers in isolated areas. Amy Forde was in Dáil Éireann this week and asked Fianna Fáil TDs Jim O'Callaghan and Lisa Chambers about a motion they are trying to put through to help tackle rural crime.
Well, the reason we're using our private members' business time this evening to debate rural crime is because of the levels of fear and concern there is throughout very many rural communities about the heightened rates of crime. Like a number of weeks ago, we saw the vicious attack on Richie McKelvey in County Offaly. As a result of that, and as a result of other offences that don't receive as much publicity, there's very significant levels of fear and concern throughout local communities. And I think it's incumbent upon the oireachtas and it's incumbent upon government to take steps to ensure that there is a response from the state to those types of crime. So what we're calling for is a multivariate approach. First of all, we think there needs to be more Gardaí on the streets and in rural towns and in rural areas. The presence of Gardaí in an area has the effect of really improving and increasing the confidence that the local community have. It reduces the levels of fear and it's a deterrent to criminals who are thinking of coming in. That's the first thing. We also believe that the decision that was made by Fine Gael in 2013 to close very many rural Garda stations has been proven to be a wrong and a bad decision. It only saved a very small amount of money by closing those stations. We think that needs to be looked at again. There are very many parts of rural Ireland now which have stations that are closed or only open part-time, and those people are left stranded for large periods of the day when there's no Garda station nearby except for 30-40 miles away. We also believe we need to rely on technology more to fight criminals. Criminals are using technology to promote their crimes. We need to use technology to fight crime, and that's where we believe CCTV should be used in much more widespread format. CCTV is available, funding is available for local communities. We think it should be availed of by the Gardaí and used by the Gardaí. And there's also changes we believe should be made to our bail laws, for instance. If an individual is charged with an offence of burglary or aggravated burglary and has already been convicted of a similar offence or another serious offence in the previous 10 years, well then the presumption should be that they shouldn't be granted bail. And if they are to be granted bail, they should only be granted bail if they're subject to a monitoring device. People sometimes forget that one of the conditions of bail that you must comply with is not to commit another offence whilst you're out on bail. And the purpose of the monitoring device would be to ensure that those offences weren't committed. So there's some of the measures, and obviously Lisa Chambers is here with me as well, who has issues in respect of Mayo, but it's apparent throughout the country, and from Fianna Fáil TDs throughout rural areas, and indeed I have to say in urban areas as well, there's a real concern about burglary, but particularly in rural areas there's concern about the levels of crime and fear that's been caused by them.
And Lisa Chambers, TD from Mayo, you're from Mayo obviously, and Dublin's far removed from Mayo. It takes a long time to get home for all of us back to the west. Do you think they're doing enough on rural crime? And again, like Jim here said, what do you want this motion to carry on rural crime?
Yeah, I think, urban versus rural, the issues are different. Rural crime is quite specific, and I think this government have consistently tried to underplay the issue. And we hear figures being thrown out that crime is on the decrease, but that doesn't really correlate with the feeling on the ground. So I think what's actually decreasing is reporting of crime. And we saw more recently the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association, in conjunction with Waterford Institute of Technology, they conducted a survey of over 600 farmers, and it found that most of them have been the victim of crime more than once. They find that their diesel is being stolen from their farmyard, that their farmyards are being targeted for machinery, for livestock, and they don't feel that they have sufficient protection from An Garda Síochána, because An Garda Síochána are so stretched. So the closure of rural Garda stations, that feeling among rural people that they don't have access to the justice system, that they don't have access to a local guard. And it's really important as well to have a local Garda station, and for the Gardaí to have local knowledge, to know the community, to have that connection, and that's what we're losing. Like if you have a Garda station that's maybe 25-30 miles away, is the guard really going to be intimately aware of the issues in a particular community? Is he going to know the community? Very difficult. And that's I'm not casting aspersions on the members of Garda Síochána. They can only do their best with the resources that they have. But certainly for the government to downplay this issue and somehow say that it doesn't exist, that's frustrating rural people, and it really is only I think compounding the matter. It's making them feel as though they're not being listened to. And I think there's a very specific crime around theft and burglary of farmyards. The specific targeting by criminal gangs of very high value goods in terms of machinery, livestock and diesel. And we know this is happening because the farmers are telling us.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Last week, Minister for Agriculture Michael Creed, CEO of Board Bia Tara McCarthy and over 30 representatives from Ireland's food and drink sector and myself took part in a Board Bia-led trade mission in Japan and South Korea. Now, there are some parts of the trade mission that are better off not reported on, but here are some of the parts that are fit for public consumption.
Will involve contact with livestock. Please go to the animal quarantine counter in the baggage claim area. If you're bringing meat and livestock products into Japan without a import certificate, please see the animal quarantine officer. Please make sure you complete the signing card before you arrive. The health authorities
this time tomorrow, where will we be? On a spaceship somewhere.
Start with an easy question. What is your name and what is your role?
My name is Akemi, and then I'm working for the marketing research, and then I'm doing the project manager.
And you've been here taking us on a tour around Tokyo and showing us different shops with the Board Bia trade mission here today. I'm wondering, had you heard of Ireland before we came? You're pulling a face.
Okay.
And if you had heard of Ireland, what did you hear about us, or what impression did you have of Ireland? I'm just wondering.
Before I start this tour, I have no idea about the Ireland food. What's the Ireland food? So I just checked the website, the internet, today. So we think Japanese meat is the best. So we prefer, but sometimes it's expensive. So. And also the beef we imported from the States and also the Australia. So 2 countries are okay. They're like familiar to us, so that's fine.
Japan, do you think we stand a chance compared to say the Australia? So you're used to Australia. Do you think you can get used to Ireland? Maybe
I'm not sure because Australia we can imagine it's a big huge land. So I cannot connect to the beef your country and to the beef. But like a cheese, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, well that's good. At least we can work. We can work on that.
Okay.
We can work on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks very much. We'll head inside.
Okay.
So my name is David Teeley and I work with Board Bia's Insight team in the Thinking House. So we're a team which are dedicated to understanding consumer behaviour, attitudes, and really getting under their skin, asking the question why, to understand, I suppose, why they make the decisions that they do, why they make the choices when it comes to food and drink that they do.
And people can probably hear there's lots of music, there's a cacophony around us, if you like. We're in a kind of a shopping centre in the middle of Tokyo. We've been going around a kind of a tour of the retail areas in Tokyo today to try and discover what consumers want and what they need, and we've gone around with a lot of Irish business people. And there is kind of one of the most important things for people back home as well. It's kind of a recognisable symbol on food or label, and we know how important that is. Is there a recognisable symbol that's going to be on Irish food in Japan? Is there anything that's being worked on?
Obviously the origin green mark is something that companies can communicate to the trade, and the quality mark as well, I suppose.
There was a nice thing that was kind of love in Ireland, a similar symbol, is that right?
Yeah, the translation or the icon, the symbol for Ireland actually translates to love. So if you were to, let's say for example, put that in front of like a pork or a beef, it would translate as love. It's the same symbol basically. It's in the Chinese typography, which is recognised here in Japan.
So that'd be a nice thing to maybe use in the future. Is that maybe the idea, to use something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's working with companies, and we're going to work with companies obviously to try and differentiate themselves in the market. So that's the purpose of our work.
My name is Conor Mulville. I'm Director of Dairy Industry Ireland, which is the umbrella representative body for the processing industry, both primary dairies and the infant farming industry in Ireland.
And we're in Tokyo. We've been here since Sunday, so 3 days now. Still both a bit jet lagged, I'd say. Yeah. And it's primarily a trade mission to expand Irish industry, both in dairy and beef. And you're representing the dairy side. So what potential do you see, I suppose, for Irish dairy in Japan?
it's enormous potential, but it's going to take a lot of work. This is a toehold. I wouldn't even call it a foothold, but it's a start, and it's very welcome. And Minister Creed, in fairness to him, when the political side of the FTA was agreed in July by Commissioner Hogan, he said he would action this straight away. And you have to give credit to Minister Creed, his officials and Board BA to act on that and kind of get a trade mission up and running very quickly. So that is very much welcome.
Geographically, Ireland is very far away from Japan. They're not really sure what Ireland is, or if we're part of the UK, if we're not part of the UK. And they've had a long-standing relationship with Australia, US, and the cheddar that I've seen on offer has been New Zealand cheddar.
Correct.
So what products are we hoping to sell into Japan?
Yeah, I would say from our own perspective, obviously a big issue for dairy industry Ireland is diversification from Brexit. Diversification opportunity. We don't see the Brexit negotiations going very well. And cheddar, we've done a lot of studies and research work with the member companies showing we have a massive exposure for cheddar. Like you're looking at the bones of a 50% tariff line on a product that really we're making margins of between 3 and 7%. So.
And it's already dropped. I mean, in 2016, cheddar exports to the UK dropped by 10% as well. So we have that as well.
Not to mention the sterling volatility. Brexit hasn't even happened yet, but it's here on our lap. So there isn't that many countries around the globe that have a taste of their population for cheddar or cheddar type cheeses, but Japan is one. So we're very much focusing to see what can be done, but we're battling with the Kiwis and the Australians in their own backyard. It's as if they were coming to the UK for us. So it's equivalent. So when we're talking to them, they're even warning us openly and said, best of luck, mate, but be prepared to invest, and our supply chain network needs to be really invested on because it's literally the other side of the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have landed at Incheon International Airport. Welcome to the host country of the Pyeongchang 2018 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games. The local time.
So it's Seoul. We're in Seoul in South Korea, and we landed last night. We're a trade mission from Ireland, obviously, and we're here hopefully to do business in South Korea. Ireland is currently trying to gain access to the beef industry here, and you just gave us a guided tour of a pig and beef processing unit. So to make things easy for people, will you tell us your name and what you do here?
Hi, my name is Jian Kim from Supex, South Korea. We do PR marketing agency for food and wine and drinks.
And had you heard of Ireland, the island of Ireland, before we asked you?
Yes, sure, I have. Because, Guinness is very famous in Korea. Everybody loves Guinness beer. And also, not many people, they are well aware of Ireland. But these days, I noticed that a lot of people, they are starting to get to know about dairy food from Ireland and some beef from Ireland these days.
Because that's a good news for us, because you have a huge population. You're only a bit bigger than Ireland, I think 18% bigger, but you have a population of over 50 million. So we are hoping to gain access. But I mean, but most of your beef, I think, a lot of your imported beef comes from Australia and America. So what is there a difference? Because in Ireland we try to push our green, clean, healthy image. Is Australian beef viewed one way and US beef viewed another way here?
I think US beef, they emphasize on the taste rather than I think it's all because of the issue we had in 2008 about mad cow disease, because it was a very, very big issue back then. So they do not want to touch that issue. So they do not mention anything about safety or something like that, but they just focus on the taste. But on the other hand, Australia, they emphasize the clean climate, clean nature, and clean and safe.
Well, people can probably hear that we're outside, and I checked my phone this morning and said it was -1 in South Korea. So thank you very much for the tour. I think we'll go into the warp. Thank you.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
And finally, we have a special agri-jobs focus in the paper this week, and our correspondent Thomas Hubert caught up with the writer of the piece, Anthony Jordan, to find out what job creation in the agri-industry was like at the moment.
Yeah, so I suppose job creation in the sector in 2017 has actually been quite positive. Every November the Farmers Journal conduct a survey, which is a 4-week long survey where we ring around companies throughout the industry and basically find out what they're seeing in terms of job creation. This year was actually very, very positive. So from the 70 companies that we got feedback from, we found that 2,395 jobs were created across them 70 companies. Yeah, so that's nearly 2,400 jobs. It's a really, really incredible figure when you consider 70 companies surveyed. In terms of those 2,400 jobs, they were actually included in that was also 136 student placements or internships, 780 seasonal jobs across the industry, and 211 graduate positions. What we also found was that at this early stage, almost 1,500 jobs were projected to be created in 2018. So these are very, very positive figures in the industry.
Okay, sustained job creation there, and that's across the board, but were there any sectors that were more prone to hire than others?
Yeah, so I mean, like in terms of breaking it up into kind of the dairy industry and the beef industry, there is no doubt that dairy will be creating jobs in 2017 simply because of the expansion that's been going on the last 2 years. So across 4 companies that we surveyed, or that got back to us rather, we found that over 500 people were employed or were newly created roles. There was actually an additional 500 roles in replacement positions created. So in total, there's about 1,000 people in those 4 companies were new hires in those companies. In terms of Ornua, who obviously are very good at promoting Irish dairy around the world, they took on 50 people, and 42 of these were replacement roles, 8 were new roles, and they also created 13 graduate positions in 2017. So this definitely shows that there is kind of a market for graduates going into Ornua. In terms of the overall graduate picture, we have 211 graduates in all. The great majority of these were in dairy companies that we found. So in terms of Kerry took on 51 graduate positions this year. Glanbia had 65 roles in the graduate positions, and Arrivo had 3. Dairy Gold had, I think it was 16 altogether, 16 next year and 11 this year. So it does definitely show that there is a demand out there for graduates. So that's a very positive news story for...
if you don't have experience, you're just out of college, there are jobs out there available.
Absolutely, and something also actually very interesting that we found was when we were talking to the Farm Relief Services, their recruitment, that they found that graduate positions are becoming more and more prevalent because students were very interested in expanding or kind of trying out different roles within organisations. So graduate programmes are becoming more and more popular, and 15% of graduate roles are actually outside of Ireland at the moment, which definitely shows with Brexit and trying to expand into new markets, it really shows that Ireland are driving that kind of international, I suppose our international kind of ideals that we want to break into new markets post-Brexit. In terms of the beef industry, then, that's also performed very, very well. And there's actually no real surprise. While Brexit is definitely a challenging aspect for the beef industry this year and in the coming years, it is no surprise that jobs have increased in the sector. When you think about it, there is 100,000 cattle now, more now in the system as dairy beef is kind of increasing. So we found that 780 new jobs were created among 11 different companies across the industry, which is very, very impressive really in 2017. Keepag led the way with this. They took on an extra 291 new staff in 2017. This is obviously aided by their 2 acquisitions in 2016 and their expansion of the facility of McCarran Meats in Cavan. Dawn Meats created 182 roles in 2017, which was very impressive. These were across various roles, including HR, sales, finance, product development, their quality team. Liffey Meats also created 21 jobs. Dawn Farm Foods started their graduate program, which took on 14 people and 14 students. So really, it is at this particular time from these figures, it's a kind of a healthy outlook for the ag sector.
Okay, well, Anthony, thank you very much. You've all those details about these 2 driving sectors, beef and dairy, but others as well, all in this week's Irish Farmers Journal. And also a jobs wall, a dairy day this Thursday for anyone looking for jobs on dairy farms and in the dairy industry. That would be the place to go. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you, Thomas.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
And that's it from this week. Thanks for tuning in, and you can keep up to date with all the farm news on the Irish Farmers Journal Twitter, Facebook and Snapchat. The producer was Thomas Hubert, the sound engineer was Ferdia Mooney, and I'm Hannah Quinn Mulligan.